Welcome to Hero Villains. Do you think Dr. Manhattan is on par with Lucifer Morningstar?
The core reason lies in the fact that many people associate Dr. Manhattan with the Hands, despite their natures and power levels being completely incompatible. The confusion stems from the notion that Perpetua and Dr. Manhattan are on par with each other, and that Manhattan is even considered superior. This is based on the fact that the Justice League once tapped into Manhattan's connecting energy when he was at full power trying to restore the multiverse and fight Perpetua. In reality, that energy was only enough to counter a restrained version of Perpetua, who only had limited control over the 7 dark powers and was much weaker than when she betrayed Luthor and borrowed the power of the Dark Multiverse through the Batman Who Laughs. Manhattan, with his raw power, could temporarily balance the scales, affecting the fabric of each separate reality, erasing the timeline and the dimensions that belong to them. However, all of those efforts were quickly exhausted when the last of his energy dissipated into the cosmic flow. This was also true for Dr. Manhattan, whose only feat on the scale of the multiverse he himself created was to manipulate the Metaverse, where any changes there would encompass all other Earths. And when he tried to repair the new 52 universes into a global multiverse, canceling the Crisis energy and restoring the infinite DC multiverse as it was in the pre-Crisis, he failed. This also happened to Wally West after he was empowered by the original Dr. Manhattan. He had the energy, knowledge of the Mobius chair and Tempest to block the effects of Crisis energy from the positive matter multiverse. Thus, he could manipulate the Hyperverse in a way to repair the damage done back to the pre-Crisis era, but it failed even with the slightest intrusion from other cosmic entities. Many people mistakenly believed that this was the remains of the real Dr. Manhattan, but they did not understand the nature of the Mobius chair. After Manhattan killed Owlman without being able to remove the device, the chair revealed a special function. It assimilated and reformed external energy sources, making them part of its own system. When absorbing energy from Manhattan, the chair shaped itself into a new source of connection, and thus Wally was confirmed to have the same quantum wave function as the original Manhattan. However, this was not the only case. The same goes for the Batman Who Laughs, who absorbed the power of an alternate version of Dr. Manhattan from an alternate Dark Multiverse. If he wanted to influence the entire DC multiverse at Crisis level, he would first have to channel the energy from the Dark Multiverse that was powering Perpetua, as he himself was incapable of influencing the entire positive matter multiverse. As such, he could not surpass Perpetua after she reached her ascended state. In many cases, Perpetua is portrayed as being superior in power, standing in a superior position. However, in Perpetua's case, after receiving the power of the Dark Multiverse, she became powerful enough to destroy the entire DC multiverse and rewrite it at Crisis level, adding Crisis energy to herself that Manhattan in his omnipotent state could not eliminate. The Justice League has also tapped into Manhattan's power gathered by the Quintessence, but that becomes irrelevant once Perpetua reaches this level. At this stage, even the Batman Who Laughs, who now possesses the stolen power of Dr. Manhattan's version of the Dark Multiverse, cannot defeat this version of Perpetua without access to other sources. The Dark Multiverse is a vast realm that existed long before the multiverse itself. In that place, reflected in the small positive matter universes below. The Dark Multiverse's counterparts, even on a cosmological level, are on par with their Hypertime counterparts. There is no basis for claiming that one Dr. Manhattan here is inferior to another, especially since the Batman Who Laughs has harnessed that power on a scale far beyond what the original Manhattan ever did. Just as Wally had resonated with Manhattan's energized connection, Perpetua, having empowered herself with the entire Dark Multiverse, flatly denied Manhattan's claims when he attempted to repair the time stream and reclaim the Mobius chair. The threat Manhattan once represented when Perpetua was at a low level in the multiverse was completely gone once she was empowered by the Crisis events, and that was the case with the Batman Who Laughs, with the powers of Dr. Manhattan from the Dark Multiverse. The Justice League with the original Manhattan's powers being collected by the Quintessence, and a copy of his connected energy via the Mobius chair being infused into Wally, who was again basically confirmed to be too weak to fight Perpetua after she received the Crisis energy. This Perpetua, who was more powerful than Dr. Manhattan, was not ready to fight the Hands. Only the Darkest Night was ready after he infused himself with the powers of the Dark Multiverse to a greater extent than Perpetua. Dr. Manhattan is just the first power addition to Diana and the Batman Who Laughs. He absorbed the powers of 3 successive versions of Manhattan by stealing powers from the Justice League, the Dark Manhattan and Wally, and then the Dark Multiverse, making even that power pool pointless. In Diana's case, it was element X. Dr. Manhattan is more powerful than Hypertime and the Sphere of Gods. I would first ask, how is this possible if Dr. Manhattan himself relies on Hypertime and is essentially part of the quantum universe as an observer to function? Dr. Manhattan exists across hyper-accelerated timelines, from the Watchum universe to the post-crisis multiverse, remaking the Metaverse, only to see how the rest of the DC multiverse rebuilds itself around it. Dr. Manhattan has never shown any supernatural abilities on Hypertime, except to indirectly affect it by placing it in the archives of the multiverse before, then recreating it again, affecting the universe of worlds. Dr. Manhattan has made this clear. Any actions he takes do not destroy Hypertimes, but rather alter them, such as crisis events, destroying the physical while the time stream accommodates them. In fact, Hypertime destroyed Dr. Manhattan, entities linked to a higher order. The orrery of worlds, such as the Speed Force wall that exists on the same level as the Tim stream, remain fully aware and undamaged by any attempt by Dr. Manhattan to expel them from the New 52. Same goes for Jack Garrick. Similar to Eborg Thrawn, Dr. Manhattan is unable to erase the paradox that operates from the Speed Force wall. He has killed Reverse Flash multiple times, only to have another version of him born or exist alongside the destroyed version coming from Post-Crisis, Flashpoint, and even the New 52 after he became a speedster. It doesn't make sense if the Flash himself is weaker than Manhattan himself. What matters is that the power Hypertime holds over them overshadows Manhattan. And Pandora was only discovered and destroyed by Manhattan after the entities of the Sphere of God cursed her to be unaffected by each crisis era being dissolved by external conditions, making her another participant in the orrery. But the Quintessence also only gathered Dr. Manhattan's energies outside of his vision after he rewrote the Metaverse, and they watched from their fixed point above Hypertime. Among them, the Endless. What did the creation of the New 52 do to them? Dream of the Endless, who remained faithful to his post-crisis experiences, explains to Superman and Batman inside the Dreaming the true origins behind the creation of the three original monitors: the Over-Monitor, Positive Matter, the Anti-Monitor, Antimatter, and the World Forger, Dark Matter, including the events that occurred when the first multiverse created by Dark Energy, Perpetua's emerged, which further states that the Sandman ignored every reboot in the DC universe, starting with the retcon of the Hands to the creation of the original Perpetua with positive forces, leading to the classic Golden Age in the pre-crisis multiverse covered by the Source Wall, and then every crisis in between, until Rebirth. What Dr. Manhattan did never affected any of the entities involved. Of course, it is argued that Manhattan is larger than the Sphere of Gods, despite never having flown beyond the Speed Force wall. It is certainly possible that Manhattan could be more powerful than some random resident god raised from the Sphere of Gods, since they are also limited to storing avatars of themselves in the orrery of worlds. But now, more powerful than the Sphere of Gods, existing since before the Perpetua multiverse was formed, older than the monitors and one of the 7 powers than the Hand in their Apex relays, that clone vanished. The embodiment of the Dark Multiverse, from which a portion of the power was extracted to recreate a version of Dr. Manhattan to empower the Batman who laughs. At the same time, over the course of several crisis eras, that energy has also fueled Perpetua, raising her to a level of superiority to the point where she is said to be far more powerful than when she was on par with Dr. Manhattan. Manhattan has incorporated some forms of magic into his arsenal, reflecting more possession than transcendence. It is through this that he has defeated many of Earth's mages, and the weakest forces formed from demons or minions of the universal gods attached to humanoid manifestations, even when they operate outside of their original domain. Does this really prove that Manhattan has gone beyond the boundaries of the divine realm? Dr. Manhattan cannot even affect a basic portion of the field of the emotional electromagnetic spectrum contained in the Green Lantern power ring, which is one of the 7 forces. Each of these colors exists outside of time and are natural forces that have no origin and no end, so he does not recognize their fundamental nature because they are self-explanatory and are modeled from pre-existing energy blocks that are manifested through their reality. So, even if he can overpower a random Green Lantern, the energy itself remains a mystery to him, as it is part of the sense of consistency that he must follow, even if he has been enhanced.
I really hope you subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, and you are the best. Thank you very much.
Because the fact that the presence is an emanation of the source, which later created Lucifer Morningstar and Michael Demiurgos, who created the hands Perpetua, the sixth dimension, and reintroduced the Vertigo characters the Presence and the Endless into the mainstream, confirms that after Perpetua was chained on the source of the wall, the source, in its own sense of identity, recreated with Lucifer, the DC creation from the ground up on a much more fundamental level. Because Perpetua is a fundamental, derived, and degraded reality, while the reality Lucifer created according to the Presence is much more complex layer by layer, and the void he left behind for creation is the same. Perpetua's multiverse was destroyed and then recreated from scratch. The ones who intervened to restore order and rewrite the sixth dimensional entities, banishing them back to their own multiverse, were Lucifer and Michael. So, chronologically, Perpetua and the Monitors are technically older than Lucifer Morningstar, since they exist on a plane where time never existed. But what does that mean? There are countless creations in Vertigo that are older than Lucifer, and the key point is that he himself never acknowledged his existence to Perpetua or the hands. When Perpetua was defeated and her entire multiverse collapsed, each creation myth was reborn from the ashes. It was these characters who reset the order beyond the dawn of time, and that intervention directly imprinted on the Monitors as they claimed. Justice League 2018 #WOWO confirms that the energy source the hands used to trigger the Big Bang, which would later shape part of the current DC multiverse, existed before and was entrusted to them. This reality encompasses all entities of the sixth dimension, making Perpetua tightly bound to the seven forces of the multiverse, forces that later permeate the DC fabric. It is this connection that also places her in direct relation to the Endless. Concepts such as the collective unconscious, the emotional spectrum, and the being of life are clearly stated in the text, confirming that they remain active throughout all levels. From there, the DC universe is portrayed as a living web, where the primal energy is both the source and the eternal bond between Perpetua. The Sandman #Toan confirms that the Endless are beyond the beginning and end of the DC creation, and are in fact separate from physical time and space, overseeing the variables that make this possible. Lucifer Morningstar existed before the dawn of time, and was there from the very beginning when DC creation was sparked from the void as a collection of supreme forces before the DC multiverse. Placing Lucifer Morningstar next to the hands is already complicated, as the hands are merely servants to the source, while Lucifer is the direct heir to the presence. The difference in power and purpose creates a huge gap, and it gets even more confusing when one compares Lucifer Morningstar to Dr. Manhattan, who existed under the power of a Perpetua, and at the same time was still within the domain of the hands. Manhattan was not confined to the orrery, but was still bound by Hypertime. In contrast, Lucifer possesses the ability to eliminate all variables, wipe out all the elements mentioned, go beyond the timeline and beyond. Unlike Dr. Manhattan, Lucifer has created his own universe, an independent multi-dimensional universe, a whole separate from the void, rather than a variant of a separate multi-dimensional hyper-time stream through the universe of worlds. That infinite expanse, where space and time are merely tools to be touched, Lucifer can manipulate in any direction, on any scale, without being bound by any constraints. Dr. Manhattan, on the other hand, cannot be separated from the quantum layer of the universe. He cannot heal the entire multiverse, nor can he restore the 52 universes to the form of an infinite multiverse. Even at full power, his sphere of influence is still limited within that framework, leaving all other universes imprisoned by the barriers that define his very nature. And it extends across physical universes, timelines, extra-dimensional dimensions, but also abstract horrors and conceptual realms beyond the mundane geometric boundaries that are used to measure the physical plane and direction of space and time. An existence that Dr. Manhattan has only scratched the surface of. It is beyond the jurisdiction of the presence, beyond the succession of creations that emerged after the destruction of the previous creation, untouched by the source. Essentially, a copy of the universe of existence, it is itself far more complex than the one created by Perpetua and has infinite layers beyond the multiverse. For Lucifer was created as the dark archetype to define the light of the presence through the darkness, separated by the void and necessary for the beginning of the consistency of the plan. Lucifer Morningstar is seen as the embodiment of pure idea, of paramount importance when placed against the eternal struggle between the great darkness and the light. It is part of the creation myth that has shaped the current DC universe since its inception, closely tied to the story of Lucifer and the presence. It is a position superior to that of the inverted one, the empty hand, or even Darkseid in his boundary infinity form. The power gap between Lucifer and Dr. Manhattan spans at least half a dozen levels, representing a huge disparity. Within his own creation, Lucifer has set absolute limits, prohibiting the interference of cosmic entities as well as other abstract powers, including Dr. Manhattan, the hands, or the manifestations of the seven forces, to assert his inviolable position. So is Dr. Manhattan a part of Lucifer Morningstar's being? Absolutely not. Manhattan came about as a result of chance, an experiment born in the flow of reality. He reaches the pinnacle of any reality created by the laws of quantum physics, where all structures are bound within a predetermined mathematical framework. However, that entire scope exists only within a level of existence that Lucifer creates from the outside. And from that starting point, Lucifer reaches far beyond all levels of existence, even higher than the previously mentioned ladders. And to affirm that Lucifer is stronger than Manhattan,
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Follow me if you like. That's it for today. Thank you very much.